Hello and welcome back to Halfway Around the Halo, the LA Angels UK podcast. I am your host, Nick Wright, and we are back for season 6, although I think that's slightly tenuous because the first 2 seasons had about 2 episodes in them. But we thought we'd start again. We haven't had a podcast since September. A lot has happened in Angels world, and we wanted to get straight back into it for you so we can discuss the current state of play. Unfortunately, I'm here to break some bad news to you. My beloved co-host Dave Evans has decided to step down from the podcast. Everybody gets to that stage of their life where existing commitments just become too much. Dave's got a lot going on between work and family and everything else. So he's decided to take a break from the podcast, which is a real shame. I'm sure you agree. When I started this back in 2019 and when Dave and I came together in 2020, I didn't really know what this was going to become. I didn't really know what I had. Dave not only became such a fantastic co-host, but a great friend, someone I really, really appreciate and have enjoyed all the times together doing this podcast with some very special names. So he's going to be sorely missed. I'm hoping, I really am hoping that at some stage Dave will come back on and join us when he has the time to do so, because I'm sure you will all miss his quips and his baseball updates, certainly. What are we going to do without knowing how Dave is playing? But instead of Dave, I wanted to keep this as a British baseball podcast. This is all about the Angels from a British perspective. Let's be honest, if you want in-depth analysis, if you want stats, if you want people on the ground there are different podcasts for you. But what we bring is a different flavour. Watching Angels baseball in the middle of the night, 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. regularly for our home games. That's when we watch our Angels baseball. That's the perspective we get from fan from 5,000 miles away. And that's what I wanted to keep it as. So whilst we're sad to see Dave go, I'm delighted to introduce Toby Barnes. Toby, of course, has been on the podcast before. I'm sure you'll remember. We've had him on in Dave's place when Dave was unavailable previously, but he's agreed to step in this year and keep that British flavour going. And Toby, how you doing?
Yeah, good. I'm excited. I'm nervous to step into Dave's very big shoes and the void that he's left. But hopefully, I'll be able to fill that void.
Absolutely, I've got no concerns at all. We've already done the test last year. You passed with flying colours. So I'm really excited to chat Angels baseball with you. And I know you actually managed to watch probably more games than Dave does. Dave very much dwindled over the years in the games he was able to watch. And maybe listeners didn't quite twig, but he certainly was going off some basic highlights and box scores at times.
I think most Angels fans can sympathise with Dave, where the later it gets in the year, the harder it becomes to watch games. I think everyone gets guilty of that when we're going towards another losing season, and then another losing season. It does wear a bit thin, but we are the passionate fans, or some would call us lunatics, who still stay up to watch the games.
Yeah, we are definitely lunatics. I mean, even I think, gave up in September. I think that was the limit for me. Not sacrificing sleep for that team. There was zero need.
Yeah, no, I think everyone had checked. It looked like the team had checked out as well by that point as well. It's kind of moves didn't pan out, and that was it. They were kind of just waiting for September to come, end the season, and then kind of spend hopefully the off season of the winter training and ready to come back for the new year, like we've been in hibernation, ready to come back out in the new year.
Exactly, hibernation. And if I put the video up of this, you'll see that Toby is growing his hair out, ready for the new season. That's what he's been doing over the winter. And I think it's going to keep coming over the season. We are now officially just 2 weeks, I think 13 days, in fact, away from pitchers and catchers reporting. That's why we're coming to you now, just before the season gets going, before we get into the spring, before we get real action to talk about, even if it is just spring training games. We wanted to come to you and talk about a lot has happened in Angels baseball world. Not all of it good. In fact, not much of it good. But I think I will start with probably the best thing that has happened to the Angels this offseason. And Toby, give me your thoughts on Ron Washington being appointed as Angels manager.
I think it's a brilliant hire for the team because he's been there, done that. He's an absolute legend of the game. And if anyone has ever caught any Atlanta games where he was previously, the passion that he brings on the side is just, it's infectious. Everyone sees it. Everyone believes in him. And everything I've heard from, everything that I've read and heard about him is just such positive news. The only questions that I do have are whether he's quite old. He's 73, I think. And giving him a 2-year deal, is that right for where the Angels want to be? Obviously, the Angels are always in win now mode, but it's kind of they still don't want to hit the reset button. So Ron Washington is another kind of positive signing, which is great because they want to win. But I don't know if a 2-year contract kind of fits with the timeline that that the team has.
Absolutely. It's funny that you say win now mode. And I think this is something we'll get onto later because I might have a little bit of dispute on whether this current Angels team is in win now mode. But I think I agree with you. I mean, on the face of it, Ron Washington was a great hire. We've seen what he's done over his baseball career. You've seen the passion he has, the way he deals with infielders, the way he gets the best out of people. And it seems like the sort of guy that the Angels needed at this point when everything else seems pretty unstable, if we're being honest, and probably putting it kindly. So I think he will bring that level-headed, experienced head to the dugout that we need. A question I always have, Toby, and maybe this is me, and I don't know if other people agree, but I generally don't understand how much a manager really impacts the product on the field. How much impact can a manager really have day in, day out to what is happening on the field? And I know we've seen it in the past with some of the bullpen decisions in particular. We saw it with Joe Madden. A lot of people criticized some of the moves he was making. But in reality, how much difference do you think that makes over the course of a season?
Well, reading Ron Washington's press conference and his notes from that, he wants to change the way the Angels run the bases because we were last in the AL base running last year. And you look at some of the players on the team, we do have some absolute flyers. So I think that is going to be a positive thing and get the end. Obviously, the largest bases came in last year, which saw a record number of base kind of stealing attempts and successful attempts as well. So I think if you can change that, then that's kind of a start. But other than that, I don't think, like you, I'm not sure how much impact they have because how much kind of face-to-face time do you have, and as much as you can try and game plan to kind of swing at the first pitch more or whatever, you can't guarantee that that's going to happen, and running bases more, you can't guarantee that's going to happen. So hopefully it's more of kind of a motivational thing because I feel like the players can get behind him a lot more, and some players, as we will probably get onto, might need a little bit extra motivation. So hopefully that can only be a positive impact.
Yeah, there's a nice link there, which I will come back to later. But I think I'm excited for Washington. I don't think I was excited as some people because I think I said at the time when he was appointed, it's all well and good getting a guy like that in, but there are so many other holes, so many other problems with this franchise and this roster at the moment that a manager, even if he is the best manager in the world, can only paper over so many cracks. And I just think I struggle to get excited, particularly at that point of the offseason when it happened. And having had the post-deadline period that we did, I think I struggled to get really excited by it. I think I'm still not really there, but I definitely take on board some of the things you say. And I think he was a good hire for the Angels, but there leaves a lot to be desired going forward. Speaking of what we've lost, I guess, now, after what we've gained, this is the first podcast we have done since Shohei Ohtani left the Angels. We've let the dust settle a bit now. Obviously, we're in 22nd of January when we're recording this. We've had a time to collect our thoughts, really, and get used to the idea that Shohei is no longer on the Angels. But give me your not really instant, give me your non-instant thoughts on how that whole process played out and how you're feeling now about he's going to join the Dodgers.
I think the more time went on and the more news pieces came out about everything surrounding it, it just made me more and more upset with the ownership because from what it sounds like, the Angels had every opportunity to offer Ohtani the money, and whether some people will question whether he is worth the money considering he's just going to bat and just going to DH the next year and then potentially will pitch less and less. But when you have such a superstar, you should want to do everything you can to try and keep hold of them. Look at what the Red Sox have done since they lost Mookie Betts. They've done nothing, and he only plays kind of one side of the ball, really, as much as he's a great defender. But I just think the Angels should have tried a little. Obviously, they made the deadline moves to try and win, try and get in the playoffs. But I feel like, from what it sounds like, they didn't do enough to try and keep him in the offseason as a free agent.
I think you're right. I think it got to that state. I think we all resigned to it, really. I know there were some people that were holding on to some sort of misguided faith that he may stay because he was comfortable in the surroundings and the Angels have been good to him. But in reality, that contract is mad. There's there is no way, I don't think Angels ownership were ever sanctioning such a deal. I don't really believe there are many clubs other than the Dodgers that would sanction such a deal, and the way it is structured. I mean, everything with the deferrals, that means you've got to have an ownership in place that is there for the long term, that believes in winning, that believes, in paying out all this money post-contract, that believes in post-performance. And I don't think the Angels were ever there. And it makes me sad because, as well as you've listened to this show, I've been pretty much on the trade Ohtani bandwagon for a year and a half now. As much as it pains me to say that, and I do said it all the time, I always caveated it as it's really hard to say that because I love watching Ohtani. I loved watching him to the very end. I also, do you know who I'm really going to miss? Our Japanese fans. I love the Japanese passion. I love the fans. I love everything they've brought to this franchise. To be honest, they've been the best thing about this franchise for years now. Just seeing how passionate they got about Shohei and the Angels. So I'm really sad to see them go. And I'm hoping some of them stick around with the Angels anyway because they've managed to get some sort of bug. But ultimately, as hard as all that is to say, I said it so many times. I'm not the only one that said it so many times. If you knew he's not re-signing, and I think deep down we knew he wasn't re-signing, why was he not traded 18 months ago? Why did we not get a mega haul that would at least give us some sort of infusion of talent into the farm, into the first, into the roster? There was potential there to really kickstart a new Angels chapter, and we just didn't do it. We had an opportunity last off-season. We had an opportunity in January. The returns would have been diminished, but still. Toby, why didn't we do it?
I like we were talking about us being lunatics. Maybe the front office were lunatics and just deluded and thought that they could put together a winning team. They could kind of scramble together and scrape and scratch and claw towards the postseason. It just didn't happen. And I feel like obviously hindsight's 2020 and everything's going to look better on reflection. But I feel like if they were going to be a proactive front office, they would have thought, okay, realistically, we're not going to be able to keep him. We should move him on. But then I also think the ownership would go, look at the endorsements that he brings in, look at the money that he brings in outside of the on-field product. And I feel like that weighed in so heavily that they then kind of got distracted about the actual kind of progressing the team in the future. They're only thinking about the dollar signs, I guess. I was going to say pound signs, but they go in dollar signs. The dollar signs from the here and now, which they've obviously lost.
I think you're spot on. I mean, you started off on the front office, and I think they obviously would have had a role in negotiations and discussions. But from everything you hear, from everything I think I understand about how the Angels are run, the reason Ohtani wasn't traded was nothing to do with Perry Manassian and his team. I think the ownership were the ones that ultimately had the call on Ohtani, and I think you're spot on in terms of revenues, in terms of everything that Ohtani brought off the field. All the income, I'm sure it came. I mean, you've been to Angel Stadium, I've been to Angel Stadium. You see the adverts, you see the Japanese, you see all of those sort of endorsements that will be coming Moreno's way when Ohtani was there. But also I think it's the prestige as well. I think the fact, the MVP award, the unanimous MVP award again, if he goes somewhere else at the deadline, we'll potentially lose that, you split it, or I don't know. I think these things make a difference too. I think for someone like Moreno, where the on-field product's not been there for a decade, having Trout win a couple of MVPs, having Ohtani win a couple of MVPs, I think those sort of things make a difference to him as well, where he can point to some form of success, even if it's not the success we want to see as fans.
Does that not make it a little bit more depressing that we have MVP players, but we can't put a successful team around them? I feel like if every player will talk about how they don't really care about the individual accolades, they want to win the team, they want to win the championships, they want to win the World Series, they want to win everything for the team, and individual accolades are great to have along the way. Whereas if you're saying that they're caring about the individual accolades, it's kind of a bit backwards on the team kind of mindset rather than focusing on one player, which is essentially what the Angels have done and focused on Trout for so long and focused on Ohtani and then having both of them. And it's just even more upsetting that they've wasted two players' primes, but gone, oh, look at how great these two players are, but then kind of not been able to have the great players around them.
I think you're right. I mean, it is depressing. I think we all agree that it's depressing. We've had these two absolute studs, two legends of the game when all is said and done, both Hall of Famers, two going to be two of the greatest of all time, and yet we have not done anything as a team. We continue to lose. Yeah. I mean, I don't think there's any other word but depressing that we haven't been able to do that. But I do think when Moreno maybe looks back on his era, I know he's fairly old now, but when his family look back on his achievements 20 years down the line, when you have a look and you see all these MVPs during his time as owner, I think maybe that means something to him. Again, this is pure speculation, but I just think like maybe that's a reason not to trade Ohtani as well, just to, get another MVP, get another season as a halo where he has all this individual success, regardless of how the team is actually doing as a whole.
I think it's great having the individual accolades of players when they are still on the team. So we can talk about Trout's MVPs that he's won and arguably should have won more because he's still there. Whereas if you're talking about a player who's left, they're then an MVP for a team that they don't play for. So you can't really harp on those as much. You can't parade them. You can't put posters of them around the stadium going, oh, this guy's a 3-time MVP, this guy's a 2-time MVP, this guy's a unanimous MVP when he's not there because of the failings of the team that were around them.
You're right, and I think it was sad. I mean, we saw at the moment Ohtani went to LA, the poster came down, didn't it, from outside Angel Stadium, which was just sort of synonymous with how everybody's mood was. Straight away, that comes down. And it is going to be sad watching him. I'm sure he's going to be a success with the Dodgers. He's a fantastic baseball player. They are in for a treat getting to watch him. I'm sure he's going to go into the Hall of Fame as a Dodger, which is going to be equally as painful to watch. But definitely wish him all the best. I'm not one of these Angels fans that will hold it against him. I completely understand the decision. I mean, if we're being realistic and you take the emotions out of it, yes, I believe the Angels have been really good to him. Yes, I believe we have been a fantastic platform for him to become this superstar he has. And I actually think the Angels do not get enough credit for how they have handled Ohtani. However, when you take that side out of it with the emotion, I mean, why wouldn't he join Dodgers? He doesn't have to move very far. He gets to play a perennial contender, a team that cares about winning, a team that cares about player development with other superstars. Like, why not?
Yeah, for sure. I also think that kind of, like I say, take the emotion out of it, but bringing in some emotion, I think we also need to be thankful that we've been able to watch him for the last kind of 4, 5, 6 years and appreciate what he has done and what he's brought, because he brought, while there was kind of not many great times, the stuff that Ohtani did just made everyone, the whole baseball world, go, wow, and look at the Angels in that kind of light. So I feel like, I mean, you and I have both been fortunate enough to go and watch Ohtani playing games regularly in person. So I feel like we can appreciate that more than a lot of people who just see the highlights on TV. But yeah, just super thankful of what we've been able to witness over the last few years.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I've said at times that it's basically the only reason to stay up in the evenings was to watch Ohtani, and actually felt pretty good about it. Just getting to watch greatness. Getting to watch some of the stuff I saw him do live, like hit his first Grand Slam in America, that kind of stuff. It was just incredible. Moments that I'll never forget and always have those memories. But it's a shame the way things have gone down. I think we can probably talk about the ownership a little bit more after this. But I just wanted to ask the question, I guess, on the flip side of all this Ohtani stuff. Did you see the comments? Reed Detmers was on a podcast last week or 2 weeks ago, talking about Ohtani, talking about the contract. Him in a group chat, I think with Patrick Sandoval and Griffin Canning, just slight elements of resentment in the way they were talking, about having to pitch every 6th day and work around Ohtani and that, and basically knowing that he wasn't going to re-sign at all. They said they didn't really think he was going to, or Reed did anyway. What do you think about that? What do you make of it? Because I've always thought that this is a possibility when you have a superstar like that. But I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I can definitely appreciate the position that Reed's coming from. Obviously, kind of pitching less, and then it makes them less likely to get. If the team's not being successful, then I guess the individual accolades come next. And if they're only pitching every 6 days rather than a normal rotation every 5, they then might not qualify and having enough innings and kind of getting into a nice rhythm. So potentially we could see kind of a really, as a positive sign to come out of this, that the rotation could be a bit stronger, pitching every 5 days and kind of having that more of a rhythm and more of a flow. So it's yet to be seen, but yeah, I can definitely see where Reed's coming from and kind of saying why are we kind of bowing down to all of Ohtani's wishes. But I think from also reading what Ohtani would have said and has said, that he would pitch every 5 days if he could, but the team held him back on that. Like when he was kind of injured and the team wanted him to pull away with his blisters and things, he wanted to carry on, but the team kind of said no. So maybe it was better in the long term, and maybe these guys that are, I guess, relatively fresher for pitching less, hopefully we'll see them come good this year.
Yeah, we're going to need them too. And I think we could just touch on this year a little bit then. And you talk about the rotation there. Let's start with it. So without Atani, without the frontline guy, you're effectively looking at now Reed Detmers to step up, Patrick Sandoval to step up, Griffin Canning to repeat what he did last year and keep improving. You've obviously got Anderson there, who you know what you're getting as a fourth, fifth sort of starter. You've got to see some improvement, don't you, from the couple of the young guys coming up now that we've seen bits and pieces from, but they need to step up. We signed Zach Plesac as a bit of depth in the offseason so far, but the rotation for me has lots of question marks. There's lots of like number 3 guys there that all have the potential to be better than they have been, but also there's no guarantee of improvement. Where do you see where we stand currently?
So I'm going to pose you a question before I answer your question. Who do you want out of the current Angels rotation to be, or who do you see as the number 1 guy? And if you don't see anyone as the number 1 guy, who do you think we could bring in that would be a number 1 guy?
Honestly, I would love to sit here and tell you I think one of these guys could become an ace or could step up and become a leader. Right now, I just don't see it. In reality, I think it needs to be Reed Detmers. I think Reed Detmers' stuff plays up. I think we've seen in patches how good he can be. He's obviously got a no-hitter on the resume, but I don't believe he's shown anything consistent enough that we could accurately call for him to be a number 1 at this point, or even a number 2. So I think Detmers is that guy. I think Sandoval can be a really nice complementary piece to him if all going well. But I just don't think any of this rotation has that potential to lead. Would you really fancy any of them in a one-off playoff game going up against another team's ace? I don't think you would. And then you look out there and what's left. I mean, you got Blake Snell, right? He's won 2 Cy Youngs. But in between those Cy Youngs, it's indifferent to say the least. You're going to be chucking quite a lot of money at a guy that has had some incredible years, but also some less than incredible years, and that doesn't pitch a huge amount of innings. It doesn't go particularly deep into games. That is a bit of a worry for me for the money. You got someone like Jordan Montgomery, who looked really good in Texas last year. I don't think he's an ace, but he would be a good addition to the to the rotation. But I think he'll probably go back to Texas. I'm not sure why he would sign here. And I think that is the other problem we have now. Are we an attractive destination to free agents? I don't think so.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think a lot of what doesn't really go spoken about is kind of a bit of an unspoken rule is the tax laws that they have in California. They are so strict on those higher earners, which is what you'd expect to go. And if you go somewhere like a Florida team, obviously they don't have the biggest budget ever in Florida, but there is no income tax over there. So I feel like it doesn't get spoken about enough where you sign a guy to a $20 million contract and he's only seeing kind of 9 or 10 of that because of the tax laws that they have. So it makes it a lot less attractive to have a guy come to the Angels who don't have a track record of winning to then say, oh, you're only actually going to earn half of what you're being paid for.
Yeah, it's very true. I mean, and I think there's ways around it. I'm sure they make ways around it basically by giving more money on the contract in the first place. But it's not a winning team. You say the tax laws are there. I mean, the Angels won't pay as much as others as well, depending on the circumstances, unless Artie gets something in his head about superstars and throws money at them unnecessarily. We've seen it all before. We might throw money at the wrong guys, but it's a worry for me. But at the same time, I don't believe ownership really know what they want to do right now either. I don't know.
I feel like
find that frontline starter or that bat, which we can talk about in a minute. I don't know if they want to be there in that situation. So we're basically reliant on the guys we have. Someone like Chase Silseth again coming up and having a year like last year, but keep improving. I mean, the stuff's there. Is the endurance there? Can he keep progressing? I don't know, but I do worry about state of play. I think we'll sign someone. I think we'll sign some depth, but that might be like a Michael Lorenzen type. I don't know if we're going to go front line. And then as we look at it, as your question from the start, is that enough?
I don't think it is. I feel like the market, there isn't a lot, like you say, left on the market. I feel like the only other one that kind of no one really wants to talk about is Trevor Bauer. And does that cause too many problems in terms of we've had so much positive media attention with Otani, and does that kind of just go completely opposite way with signing someone with so many question marks like a player like he has? As much as he would be an effective pitcher, it's all the other kind of questions around that. And yeah, like you say, I don't think there's not a lot coming through either. Obviously, Perry infamously had his all pitcher draft in his first one as the GM, but not a lot of that has panned out, and there's still not really much depth. And obviously, because we went all in at the deadline, we lost even more pitching depth. So I just don't see where kind of the rotation goes kind of more than what's there. The only other one is potentially Sam Backman, who the Angels have said they want to try and build up as a starter, but he's not been healthy enough and his back has struggled a lot. So I feel like he's better as a reliever. But obviously Griffin Canning missed an entire season with his back and he looked pretty good last year. So you never know what could happen.
You're right. Backman is the curious case. The stuff's there, although whether the stuff's there as a starter, I don't know. As you said, health has just been such a problem. He's unreliable so far. He's probably most likely going to have a future in the bullpen rather than as a starter, unfortunately, which means that the cupboard is pretty bare in terms of impact arms straight away. Speaking of the bullpen, one area so far this offseason the Angels have decided to strengthen and needed to. I think the bullpen was 25th in ERA last year, which kind of, the team was not really good anywhere, but it kind of sums things up from the pitching front. They have gone out and made a splash in the last few days, although not officially announced yet, on Robert Stevenson from the Rays, something like 3 years, 30 million-ish. For him. They also went out and signed Adam Simba, Adam Kolarek, old friend Luis Garcia, to sort of strengthen that bullpen. What do you think about the route Perry has gone so far in this offseason? We're quite late into it. And do you think that's going to make a difference alongside the young guys we brought up last year?
Well, it's the same as every year. I feel like Perry has focused a lot on spending money on relievers, and so far it hasn't really panned out. Like you say, 20 kind of bottom end of the league in ERA for the bullpen. It's kind of none of the moves have really worked out in previous history as far as things go. Kind of people like Tapero and Loop, who we've chucked a lot of money at. Estevez started really well last year, but didn't finish strongly after the All-Star break. I think I was reading Sam Bloom's article in his mailbag, and he allowed 24 runs in 22 and a third innings to close the season, which as your closer, you really don't want to happen. So yeah, I feel like while the money has been spent, it hasn't really been spent effectively on the bullpen in previous years. So hopefully that can turn around.
Yeah, I think you're right. We say this every year, don't we? That the bullpen's improved and Perry's gone and spent some money there and got these veteran arms coming in and improving things. But in reality, I do worry. You look at someone like Luis Garcia. He wasn't very good when he was here the first time around. I didn't like him then, and now he's a few years older. He's come back. We've chucked not an insignificant sum of money at him. I think it's like 4 million, isn't it? So he's coming in. Adam Simba, I really hate. I don't like funky. I've always said this. Hold it against me, but I really hate like funky arm slots. I just can't stand watching them. Soft tossers, just not for me. So there's that. Kolarek, who has been optioned now, which is fine. Plesac as well. We don't know if he's going to be depth for the pen or depth for rotation, but he's also got options. I guess I am excited. I mean, Estevez was overworked massively last year because we basically didn't trust anybody else. I do think that we'll probably find a middle ground between the first half of last year and the second half. I think he's a good bullpen arm. I think he's going to have a bounce back year and be pretty good as long as we can keep the health of those around him. We looked at guys like Ben Joyce obviously coming back and hopefully having a really good year. Jose Soriano, who we saw lots of promising stuff from as well. So I think the pen I'm actually relatively optimistic about. Not so much actually for the arms that Perry's added. Well, when you add Stevenson in there as well, who's a really good addition, hopefully, if we get Ray Stevenson. But I think for the arms that we brought up last year, a bit more experience, another off-season to get stronger, get their endurance up, I think we could have a good bullpen this year.
Yeah, I think so. I think it all depends on where you also kind of see Silseth, and also where you see Jose Suarez as well, whether he kind of sticks in the bullpen too, because then you've got a couple of mid to long relievers to kind of ease the burden on the rest of the guys in the bullpen. And like you say, with Joyce and Estevez and Soriano, we definitely have. I feel like Perry's kind of mantra is just flamethrowers. Yeah. And that's kind of where he's gone with it. And kind of while you take a few wild pitches every now and again, it's kind of when you've got guys throwing kind of upper 90s into the triple digits, you kind of it becomes a little bit indefensible, and it's whether they can stay healthy. I think that's the biggest thing is health. We say it every year, because the Angels always seem to struggle with injuries. But I feel like the bullpen health is one of the biggest things.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think health is the big one, and we'll talk about it now. But then 4 of them will go down at the same time for 3 months at a time, and then we're struggling at the back end. And that's when you get those guys coming up who are pitching far too many innings that really, really don't deserve to be in a big league bullpen for more than a couple of days at a time. But I'm relatively optimistic about where the pen is going. I think Suarez definitely should be in there. I think probably keep him stretched out a bit in case he needs a spot start. But ultimately, I think he should be like the swing man in there. Just give us a bit of length if we need to. I see that as where his probably best role is this year, especially now Jaime Barria's gone. RIP to Jaime, my favourite, but he's finally gone off to pastures new, and I wish him all the success in the world there. Where else we going? So I said we'd touch on Moreno, and this has been an interesting off-season in the sense that, as we've spoken about, we haven't really spent any money, despite Atani coming off the books and us going up to the luxury tax last year and thankfully just making it back under it. But we haven't really spent any money. Our name's been attached to a lot of the big free agents, but has never really seemed like we're actually going to pull the trigger on them. You look at someone like Josh Hader that just went to the Astros the other day for $95 million, 5 years. That's a move that the Angels could have made if they're going all in the bullpen, but haven't done so. Then you look at guys like that haven't signed yet, like Bellinger, and we talked about Snell. Some of the lesser guys, I think we desperately need some more power in a DH. You know, someone like Soler or JD Martinez. These guys that haven't signed yet and potentially the Angels should be looking at, but we just don't seem to be able to pull the trigger. And do you think that's because Moreno is just really confused about what he wants to do with this team, what he wants to do with spending money, whether he's willing for this team to just, get back into the middle of the pack and not be right up the top in terms of spending? I don't know. What are your thoughts on the ownership right now?
Yeah, I think, like you say, it's very confusing. Obviously, I guess you could say the ownership's a little bit more stable this offseason compared to last year when Moreno put the team up for sale and then decided that he didn't want to put the team up for sale, and kind of still, I guess, with the lack of moves is kind of more likely to say it's very questionable what he actually wants to do, whether he wants to have one go at it or whether he doesn't want to spend his money because he's not sure where he wants to take the team. Obviously, you touched on he's advancing in age and he doesn't might not see it in for the long term. It's very, very questionable, and obviously because he is so media shy, I feel like nobody will ever understand what's going through his head and what he wants to do. Maybe he doesn't even know, and he's not sure whether he wants to take it for long term. But I feel like there needs to be some sense of direction that there just clearly isn't right now.
I think the lack of sense of direction is why I've been so depressed over the off season, and just we've seen this coming for a while. It's just, as we said earlier, it's papering over the cracks with these big signings and trying to just spend money across the board and just 10 million here, 12 million there, try and put a roster on the field that wins, which I admire in some ways. But there's been no real focus on development. There's been no real focus on the long term. I don't see a strategy. I don't see a plan. I don't see an ownership that really understands how to win. And I think that's the worst part. We're 9 years losing now, 9 years without the playoffs. It's just a worry. And I don't see anything from this offseason that suggests they get it either. These short-term bullpen signings, again, fine, they're going to make the bullpen a bit better for the year, but they're not helping us in the long run. This is going to be a big draft coming up this year, I think. Now we've got a high first-round pick. We're going to have a couple of second-round picks. I think this is a big draft for Perry and his team. But ultimately, we've said it all along, Moreno has to sell the team soon. For this Angels team to ever really get back to a place of competing or get back to the place we want them to, I just don't see it ever happening under this ownership. So unfortunately, I think it's that time where we can't keep going through off seasons like the last one where we thought he was going to sell. This one, whilst he hasn't said anything, it still feels like it's on the cards and he's contemplating what to do with the team. We just seem in limbo, Toby, and I just don't know how we can progress forward as a ball club whilst this is hanging over us.
Yeah, I feel like Moreno, I think, has said that he has no plans to kind of pass it down to his family either when he goes. So something's going to have to happen there. Obviously, the land deal that the Angels have expires in 5 years' time now. So 5 seasons' time, the Angels could be homeless. And obviously there was the whole big thing around the mayor, and the investigation that happened there with the dodgy dealings that went on. So it's all loads of questions and not
Alleged.
many answers.
Alleged.
The investigation happened. It
Yeah,
was all the alleged
it's
dodgy
true.
dealings, but yeah, I feel like there's just so many unanswered questions, and I feel like the least that Artie Marino could do is come out and explain himself, explain why he wasn't able to retain Otani, what his plans are for the team, whether he's actually going to keep the Angels in Anaheim, and just things like that. I feel like he needs to just clear the air almost.
I think you're right, but I think he's needed to do that for quite a long time, and will only talk to very, very select journalists on very, very select occasions. As we saw a few times last year, I think things being leaked out of the Angels, which had definitely come from Moreno himself, to his selected choice of journalists. But that's by the by. I mean, I'm concerned, and I think let's not talk about this today. There's too much else going on and too much else that's gone on in the off season. But I think as we get into spring, we see how the lineup is actually constructed, how the roster's looking. I think we should come back to this, because right now this is probably the least optimistic I've been going into a season for quite a long time. And I'm generally more of the realistic one that isn't as blown away by some of the stuff we've done and the optimism going into years. So I'm worried. I'm worried where we go as a franchise. I'm worried what we do with the ownership. I'm worried what sort of product we can even put on the field right now, and whether these young guys we have are actually going to live up to their potential with the sort of development we know that we have here.
Or the lack of, I guess.
Yeah.
I feel like the Angels aren't really renowned for their player development. And the guys going through, I mean, you look at the guys, I mean, Hoppy was traded to us and then did well. And then you look at like Neto and Shanoel, who played 20, 30 games in the minors and then were straight in. So kind of there wasn't really much player development there. So I think that needs to be a focus in getting the minors and getting those guys up to speed.
Absolutely. I want to talk about those young guys once we get to spring, because a lot is going to rest on them this year. To be fair, very unfairly to them, I think. They don't deserve to have so much pressure put on them, but they're going to be big for this team next year and beyond, fingers crossed. So don't want to talk about them now, but we will come to them on a later episode. But the one player I do want to talk about, and actually Sam Bloom has tweeted pretty much exactly my thoughts on the matter, and that's Anthony Rendon. And what he said the other day about playing too many games. And actually, do you know what the worst thing about this is? And this is where Sam has kind of got the nuance. I fully agree with him. I've said it for a long time. 162 games is too many. There is zero reason to play so many regular season games, particularly in the short span they do. There's definitely like the potential to add more rest days in there to give these players a bit more time, with their families, a bit more time just recovering. It's a long, long season. You might cut down on injuries that way. However, Anthony Rendon is not the man to be sharing this message, considering his availability for the Angels and clearly his apathy towards baseball and Angels baseball. And I don't know if I've said this on the podcast before or not, but when I've been over in Anaheim, I've spoken to people, and this has been apparent pretty much for his whole time there. He doesn't want to be there. He doesn't really want to be in the area. He doesn't really want to be playing for the Angels, but he's just being paid so much money to be there. So he has to be. And that is not basically the exact opposite of anything you want in a dugout, and particularly anything you want around these young guys we've just named who are trying to make a name for themselves in the game and have all the heart and desire and willing to be the best players they can be. So what do we do about Anthony Rendon, and what did you think about his comments?
I just think, a bit like you say, he is not the person to be complaining about the length of a season. He's played, less than 200 games in his 4 years with the Angels. He's averaged less than a third of the season, and he's complaining about it being too long when he's kind of not even there for most of it. And I just think it makes sense when you see his attitude and his demeanor when he has played and when he has been around. He just seems like he doesn't really care. And that is something that, like you say, you don't want when he was signed to be a clubhouse leader. He was signed to be a forefront of the franchise and take the team forwards and be one of the lead three guys. And he just hasn't proven to be that. And the fact that he pretty much so clearly doesn't want to be there, but he's also tied into too much money that the Angels can't really get rid of him. They would never be able to trade a contract like that either. They're just kind of hamstrung for the next, is he signed for another 2 or 3 years? And I feel like they're just going to have to keep him around for that time.
I think it's 2 more years, isn't it? Hopefully. Maybe it's
Yeah,
time.
the less time the better, but I just think they can't really get out of it either, and they have to. I feel like with Washington and the new first base coach they got in, who knows Rendon personally, hopefully that can inspire him a little bit and get him to at least show some effort, whether he actually means it or not. But hopefully the managerial moves that have made can help get him back to loving baseball, because no one wants to see anybody not enjoying their time, and I feel like everyone wants him to enjoy his baseball. It's just so clear that he hasn't done the last few years.
Yeah, I think I need to do my research, but actually, I think it is 3 years because didn't he sign a 7-year deal when we signed him, which means 3 to come. I actually suggested last year we just pay him off and just get it over with. You have to pay him the money regardless. If he's going to be that toxic around the clubhouse and care that little for the franchise, just pay him his money, defer it if you have to, find a deal with him to get rid of him. But we'll see. As you said, there's new coaching staff. Maybe they can get the best out of him. But at the same time, even when he was doing well for the Nats, Papelbon came out the other day, didn't he? Said he played with him and he hated baseball then. So I don't think this is a new thing. I think he's just good at something and gets paid a lot of money to do it, but doesn't enjoy it.
Yeah, so I've just used quick fingers on the keyboard here. He's signed for another 3 years at about 38.5 million a year and becomes a free agent in 2027.
That is the most depressing thing I've heard all. But we're going to have to deal with it. We have to hope he bounces back. I did a whole thing at the start of last year about what an X factor he could be if he was healthy and was hitting. He didn't hit well. He then got injured. We didn't see him for the rest of the year. And I honestly have zero expectation that we're going to get anything positive from him again this year.
Well, yeah, I think there was a bit of a joke going around that the most effort he showed all season was trying to grab that Athletics fan at the start of the year. So let's hope that doesn't continue.
Yeah, it was nice to see him show some fight. Well, I mean, basically, the 2 fights he's had as an Angel are the 2 best things he's done. Other than that's it, right? There is
Yeah.
very little other highlights. Yeah, I'm not optimistic. We'll see. But Rendon's obviously going to play a part. He'll probably get injured fairly quickly. We need to sign another third baseman, basically, because you can't rely on him. And there's going to be some DH at bats anyway. So worst comes to worst, then you can keep him healthy that way, I guess. Him and Trout can rotate around the DH just to try and keep them healthy. But yeah, as you can tell by my mood, I'm not exactly enthused by the prospect of where this team goes this year and some of the veteran leadership that we might or might not see from our third baseman.
Yeah, where do you think the position the team? Where do you think that the Angels will? Where do you think they're going? Where do you think that the ownership wants the team to go? Do you think they are win now? Do you think they are rebuilding for the future? I feel like there's nothing that swings either way. So where do you see it?
This is my point. I don't think there is a direction. I don't think ownership have these thoughts. And if they do have these thoughts, they're probably deluded enough to think we can put a winning product on the field still. And right now, we just absolutely can't. I generally think they probably are in that semi mode between rebuilding on the fly, which is kind of what we've been doing over the past decade, just trying to put enough pieces together to win, but it doesn't work. I think they have to commit either way now. And for me, I've been saying it for a while, you need a rebuild. I'm sorry, the only way that this franchise moves forward now is by breaking things down and going with the young guys and getting rid of the veterans and focusing on player development, focus on the draft, trade who you can. But I don't think they're going that direction either, because especially when the financials are so uncertain, obviously with the TV deal and everything else, I don't think that's the path they're going down. But in reality, we've proven we can't win in this approach. You have to try something different, and that's a rebuild.
I also think the Angels don't have a lot of tradable assets either. The only tradable assets the Angels have are the young guys. There's no kind of proven veterans that would bring back a return of any prospects that are worth keeping hold of and developing, because they got rid of all they could, and all the other guys were free agents last year, and they've gone on to pastures new. So I feel like you'd kind of be trading one kind of good young guy, so say like either an Hoppy or a Neto, or even like someone like Mickey Moniak, and you wouldn't be able to get those caliber of prospects back. You might get 2 or 3, but they just wouldn't be the quality of what you're giving up.
I think you're right, but at the same time, I do think there's guys like Luis Rengifo, Brandon Drury, Taylor Ward. All of them still have trade value. Drury obviously has a year left in his deal. Rengifo and Ward are still in their ARB years. I think there is potential to get stuff back for them if you want to, but You're right. I mean, we don't have the prized assets that are going to bring in franchise-altering prospects. You're going to have to focus on your development, and you're going to have to focus on bringing through your own. But it's a tough situation to be in. The way the payroll is, the way the franchise is built around a cornerstone legend, around Mike Trout, who I don't want to see traded. I don't think will ever be traded. I think Mike Trout is here for good, and you play around him, and you try and build a team around him still. But yeah, not the best position as we're in mid to late Jan, going into spring training. I don't think we really know who this team is right now. I don't think we know what the direction of the team is right now. And I think there's so many questions that we're going to be answered over the next few months, probably, which is going to be fun for us to break down.
Yeah, hopefully the questions that we have, and I feel like every Angels fan, listen to this pod or not, they're going to have the same questions about the direction team, where it's going, what they see happening for the year. So hopefully over the next kind of couple of months going into the spring, some things become a bit clearer, and whether the Angels make more signings, whether they don't. I feel like if they do stand pat, then you kind of know that they're kind of settled in for another season of mediocrity, which is the worst place you want to be. I think you either want to be a bottom feeder or you want to be challenging, and the Angels are neither. They're not bad enough to be terrible, but they're also not good enough to be good. So it's kind of, you're stuck in that bit of an in-between space. There's I don't know how much you're into basketball, but in the NBA they call it a bubble team, who are never bad enough to be terrible. They're never bad enough to get like the top picks, but they're also never good enough to actually do anything meaningful. And I feel like the Angels are stuck in their own little bubble right now.
Couldn't agree more. It's a great analogy. We are the definition of mediocrity, I think, and have been for quite a long time. I think it summed it up, didn't they? We actually got a pretty high pick effectively at the end of the season, and then lost a couple of spots in the lottery, which was the most Angels thing ever, wasn't it? To fall down from a potential really high pick. But that just kind of sums up where the franchise is. And I think you're right on what we're going to see over the next few months. But what I will say is I need you to take on the Dave role, that as soon as we win a few games, we're all positive, everything's hunky-dory, and we're looking at the playoffs in the future. So we're going to be up and down like a roller coaster all year, and that's how we do it on this pod.
Well, I mean, your favourite motto is, if you win every series, you win 2/3 of your games, you're a playoff team. So that's the motto I'm going to keep. If you win 2 out of every 3 games, you're a playoff team. So I'm going to keep that. If we lose 2, we're going to go win 4. We're going to go win 2 out of every 3 games, and we'll be back in the playoffs.
Absolutely. I mean, and as I always say as well, if you can't be optimistic in spring, when can you be optimistic? So I want to keep this downbeat negativity going for a few more weeks. But as we come to that final week of spring, you'll see that's when the real predictions come, and the positivity comes out for a week or 2.
That's when the switch flips, is when we get into the season. The hype, I feel like it's so counterintuitive, because the hype returns because the season's about to start, and you think, oh, this is going to be a good year. This is finally the year. I mean, I've been an Angels fan since 2017, 2018, so I haven't actually seen the Angels in the playoffs, like as a fan of the team. So that would be just an absolute dream. Whether that comes to fruition this year remains to be seen. Like I said, there's a lot of time to come between now and spring, and then especially between spring and the end of the season. But hopefully, things start to go in the right direction between now and April.
Fingers crossed. And when we win the Cactus League again, we'll be singing in the streets, ready to go. But
well, you're a Tottenham fan, right? So you're used to the preseason trophies counting as the only trophies that you get. So you know
that Audi Cup. Give me that Audi Cup. So I'm going to leave it there. We've covered a lot of ground over the last 50 minutes or so. Plenty for us to talk about. We're going to try and keep this fairly regular from spring training onwards. We'll be back again then. We'll talk about where the Angels currently are, hopefully with a few more signings on the roster ready to go for the year. So thanks for coming on. Appreciate your time, and go Halos.
Yeah, go Halos. I'm excited to see where this goes this season.
Absolutely. If you enjoyed this, please do go hit that subscribe button. We're fingers crossed you'll be watching this on YouTube now, because I think I'm going to put this online. But also, if you're on Spotify, hit that subscribe, Apple, iTunes, wherever you're listening to this, please go do it. But yeah, go Halos.